The mythology is that it was Khrushchev who gave Crimea to Ukraine, sort of the republic from the Russian Federation Republic to the Ukrainian Republic in 1954, which is not true, but it's a convenient mythology.
So, Nina, it's so kind of you to take the time to speak to us. How is Khrushchev, your great-grandfather, how is he remembered in Russia today? What would people first think of him when they think of him?
Well, he's not remembered too much. He comes up in certain conversations once in a while. Generally, because Russia has been for over 15 years, if not 20, has been pushing Stalin out, Stalin up. And since Khrushchev denounced Stalin, so he becomes then a negative character. If Stalin is a positive character, and I think the latest poll is that Stalin is at 65% approval and support. So clearly, if it's 65, Khrushchev would be in under 30, which is
Really?
sort of the case. But most of the time, he's falling out of people's memory. Even in there was a great play a few years ago called Gorbachev, about Gorbachev. And as we know, Mikhail Gorbachev, the father of perestroika, of kind of the reform changes that brought the end of the Soviet Union, he himself declared numerous times that he came out of Khrushchev's thaw, of that period of reform, de-Stalinization in 1950s and early 1960s. And so I went to this play, and Khrushchev was not mentioned once. So there was all sorts of people. In fact, I think every leader of the Soviet Union, and even post-Soviet and before Soviet, but Khrushchev was the one. He kind of fell out of history, and under Putin, even more so.
And is that because? I mean, he was obviously a huge supporter of Stalin through the purges, but because he denounced Stalin, is it because he's seen as a moderate figure? Is that the thing? He's seen as a moderate, almost moral figure?
Well, he was a Stalin disciple, and then he denounced Stalin, and who on earth is Khrushchev to dare to denounce Stalin? And Gorbachev is very unpopular. I think he's the most unpopular figure because reforms in Russia often, or more often than not, do not get along. And so they both fall out of history. And Boris Yeltsin, also reform, also sort of falls out of history. So yes, he denounced Stalin, but also, as you know, I mean, with Ukraine war going on, and Ukraine war going on since 2014, since the Russian annexation of Crimea, sort of the mythology is that it was Khrushchev who gave Crimea to Ukraine, sort of the republic from the Russian Federation Republic to the Ukrainian Republic in 1954, which is not true, but it's a convenient mythology. So Khrushchev is guilty of a variety of things, especially in the current political climate.
And do you feel that Khrushchev would regard Putin in the manner that he regarded Stalin when he denounced him? I mean, is it his view of, because he was, of course, a strongman autocratic leader himself. I mean, that's the role he assumed when he took over from Stalin. What would he make of Russia today? What would he make of Putin, do you think?
Well, first of all, Russia is a despotic system. It has never stopped being one. And so actually, in fact, one of the tragedies that Khrushchev went through, and in fact, when he was ousted in retirement after 1964, he spoke about it numerous times, is that you try not to be that. You try not to be that autocratic leader, but you just can't. You can't help yourself because the system is set up for an autocracy. So yes, I mean, it was kind of interesting because in Western press particularly, you could read that Khrushchev was a dictator. And I always say, no, he was a despot, but he wasn't a dictator, which is a difference, because despot is the person who acts on singular decisions. But dictator is the one who demolishes everybody who stands under you. Or he was part of the despotic system. I don't know. I mean, I find it very difficult to read history into today. I mean, I find it easy to read history into today, but assuming that we would know what previous leaders would say about today is very difficult. uh, I think, I mean, first of all, I don't think he would even consider comparing Stalin to Putin, or Putin to Stalin for that matter, because in Khrushchev's view, Stalin was still a figure. I don't know if you would consider, if Khrushchev would consider Putin a figure, because let's remember that when Putin assumed power, he was, I think he was a lieutenant colonel in KGB, but it
Yeah.
wasn't. I think he was a major in KGB. He was even less than a lieutenant colonel, because lieutenant colonel was a title, a rank given to him in after he retired from KGB. So it was kind of an honorary rank. And also Khrushchev had issues, serious issues, all his life, and particularly after Stalin's death. And that's part of the part of desalinization with KGB of any kind. And so he would, I don't know, I've just imagined he might have said, is that, what do you want? You got a man who was at low level KGB rank. Of
Yeah.
course, he would be in charge of the Kremlin, and he would start acting as if he owes it all, which essentially what happens.
Because Khrushchev had this very strict, because most people, when they fall out of favor in Russian history, they don't last very long. Historically speaking, that's been the case. But he retired, didn't he? He went off and he had a retirement. He smuggled his memoirs out. He lingered, Khrushchev, after he was powerful, which is quite rare, I suppose, in Russian history.
Well, and that's actually, and he himself, when he was ousted, it was not really a retirement. It was a meeting, the plenary meeting, in which it was decided that he's going to sign a petition to retire, which he did. Somebody wrote it for him, to him. He signed it. He didn't fight for his continuation in the Kremlin, which in fact made it a very peaceful and almost legitimate transition. Because if he fought, it would have been another cycle of violence in Russian history, and he chose not to do it. And when he did, he said that, I'm proud of the party. I'm proud of what I've done, because only 10 years or whatever years before that, I would have been, sent to Gulag, if not killed. And here we
Yeah.
are. So that was his achievement, and he always thought of it this way. He did not smuggle his memoir. That's actually a story that his son Sergei, who was in charge of it, made up because he did. And Khrushchev really, what he was not going to denounce his son in the middle of the KGB hunt for who did it and who didn't. So that I just want to also make it clear. And Khrushchev died completely kind of flabbergasted by the fact that his memoirs came out on the West. But anyway, that's part of history already. So yes, he did change the Soviet Union to the point when retired leaders were no longer in need to be dead.
What a strange legacy that is among all the many other legacies that he left. Nina, what a fascinating story it is. And I think many people will go off from this and go and read a bit more about him and that period. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thanks so much.